good morning to all our audience and to Mr. Nayak. So, this is our third edition of our show, The Third Eye. So, today the topic of discussion will be the circular economy. And if you can briefly explain to the audience that what is circular economy?
Yeah. So, circular economy, in a very simple words, if I want to tell, is it's a system where basically nothing goes as waste and the nature is regenerated. Very simple, simply put at. In fact, it's a system where the products are kind of circulated continuously by either using recycling or recycling is in fact the last concept which is actually there, by reusing and repair and remanufacturing, refurbishing, and finally in terms of repair. So products are in circulation. That's the whole concept of circular economy. It builds on the basic principles of three principles which is actually there in terms of eliminating waste and pollution. It talks about keeping products in circulation continuously at their highest value, and also there is regenerating nature. So that's the three principle it falls on. It also looks in terms of the way what we do, right? Way how you produce things, how you consume things, and how you actually manage waste. I mean, it looks at things very differently from the current linear economy. You know, the linear economy currently what it is about take, make, and dispose, right? So that's the linear economy. So it's a straight line. In the circular economy, we are trying to look at very differently. Take that line and join that line, right? End to end, join it and make it a circle. So once you make a circle, the waste which comes out at the end of that line, it becomes a resource, right? So that's the whole concept of circular economy. The finite resources which is actually kept, instead of taking that finite resources, making something and disposing it, and then eliminating that finite resource, we are trying to create that resource, that finite resource, leave it as is, and take that resource and keep it in circulation forever. That's the whole concept.
Right. That fairly explains the main thing about circular economy. And now our second question will be like, if you can explain in brief, what are the three principles of circular economy?
Sure. As I already told about the three principles, the first principle is talks about eliminating waste and pollution. You know, the waste, the concept of waste is, I would say, is a design flaw itself, right? It all starts with that. The product which is actually currently being manufactured is tending to get into waste itself. The design currently, which is in part of the linear economy, you're designing a product where by end of life you are trying to throw it across. You're going to use that product. So the most important, and if you talk about nature, nature doesn't have any waste. Nature doesn't make any waste. Nature takes every waste in the nature is basically a resource. It consumes itself, right? So whereas when we actually design a product, we design in such a way it becomes a waste. So the first concept is to eliminate waste and pollution. You design a product in such a way that it is durable. First of all, it is durable, it is usable, right? It is functionable. You are trying to use that product for a long time. It's durable in the place. It is able to you are able to kind of share this product in case you need to do it. You can be able to repair the product or refurbish the product or remanufacture the product. And end of the day, if you are not able to kind of finally use it, right? Use to that maximum extent, then you are able to recycle it at the end, and you are to break into components, right? So usually what happens, the product, if it is like a blended product, for example, if you talk about a fabric which has blends, you'll not be able to kind of recycle it because it's all blended in. So you manufacture in such a way that basically you design the product in such a way, not only at used phase, but also in terms of when it becomes a waste, finally you are supposed to recycle it, you are able to recycle it properly. That's the first concept, where the design of the product is very important, and elimination. Also, it is important when you're designing the product is to kind of ensure that least amount of resources, energy consumption is there, least amount of pollution is being done, right? In terms of the air pollution, when the product is actually getting manufactured, or the use phase of that, less amount of air pollution, less amount of water pollution is being also done, right? So these are the concepts which needs to put in at the design phase. That's the first principle. When you go to the second principle is we talk about the product and the materials in circulation, the highest possible value. Here we talk about the use phase, where the product, once you might have a product which is able to recycle, reuse, and all these things, but you might not end of the, it is a human psychology, use and throw, right? I mean, that's how we have been built in. So that's the use phase, where you are trying to use that product, you are trying to use it to the maximum extent. You take a garment, you take a product which you kind of use it everywhere, right? Maximize that usage. and finally, if there's something wrong about it, you are able to repair it, or you are to share that product with somebody else. So, and then finally able to give it to the proper recycling, right? So that is the second phase of it. Circulate the product at the continuous highest possible value. And the third is region in nature. When you do these first two principles, end of the day, what will happen is the resources which is there, the finite resources, you will consume less of that, right? I mean, that's the logic there, because these resources which is already there is in the loop. So you consume less of that, you leave that finite resources there, so nature regenerates itself, right? That's the whole concept. That's how it was. See, it's a human intervention which is creating this waste. We are removing the resources, where instead of mining that entire planet to get resources, you leave it and not touch the biodiversity over there. Or in terms of the farming practices, right? So reduce amount of farming which will happen because you are consuming less of that, and also the farming practices being regenerative, soil health and everything comes in, because if you have regenerative farming practices, there is a carbon which is actually kept in, tilling is not happening, carbon kept in the soil, or the less usage of fertilizers and chemicals which is actually there, which is also a cause for a global warming thing as well. So these are these are the three principles.
Thanks. Now, coming to our next question, which I think is how circular economy has shaped over the years.
Yeah, so I would say circular economy has no single kind of date. You cannot pinpoint a particular date when actually circular economy kind of concept came in. And there are very schools of thoughts basically for the circular economy. I mean, there is this industrial ecology, we talk about biomimicry, which is actually a concept as well, and cradle to cradle, very well heard of. Various schools of thought has led to this. In fact, Boulding has actually was one of the first person who actually kind of brought this concept of circular economy. But then later on, William and Walter and Mulvey actually kind of identified the principles of the circular economy. But you would give credit to Allen, who actually in his book, basically the economics of natural resources, actually first coined the term circular economy. But the popularization, and that was way back in 1988, right? But the popularization of circular economy happened with Ellen MacArthur Foundation, where they proposed this, they made it very popular, especially in Europe and US. And in fact, European Union actually kind of 2014, they actually created a circular economy vision, right? And in 2020, they made the circular economy action plan actually was created by the European Union. And, but the father of circular economy, if you have to kind of identify, and that was actually proposed in the World Economic Forum, was William McDonough. So who actually wrote the book Cradle to Cradle, right? Remaking the things how we make, right? So that's the book which was there. So he's kind of considered father of circular economy. But one of the things which is recognized with circular economy nowadays is basically the R's, right? So we talk about the R set of models, and that was the first 3 R's was way back quite early 1970s, where the 3R principle came in place, which is like the reduce, reuse, and recycle, right? But later on, gone into a higher number of R's got added up. You have 7 R's, then later on, finally, it has come to the 10R model as well. So this is in terms how things shaped up for the circular economy.
And so our next question is, what are the statistics on waste globally? Like, if you can explain to our audience.
Yeah, so I mean, just to give a amount of the waste we are generating, currently about, if you take about the municipal waste, which is basically the documented waste which is actually there, close to about 2.1 billion tons of waste is actually getting generated annually, which is going to go to close to about 3.8 billion tons by 2050. That's usually, that's about something like about 70 to 80% increase in the waste generation. And as developing nations are becoming developed, so their increase in consumption is becoming rapid. And because currently we are consuming the linear way, right? So the waste is getting generated, and that is increasing in a far higher kind of this thing. And you talk about the waste. 20% of the waste is only recycled on the maximum level, and 80% goes into landfill completely. You know, the landfill. When I talk about the landfill, US has the biggest landfill of them all, right? So I'll come to that. But in terms of the amount of waste generation, China is the biggest waste generation. Like almost 18% of the waste is coming from China. But they are not the number one in terms of per capita. It's very important to identify per person consumption, and where US actually stands out, which is like close to about 2.58 kgs per person per day, right? That kind of waste actually comes out for a person, which is followed by Canada and Australia. Although US ranks 25th in the overall mix. In fact, as I was talking about, the biggest landfill which is actually there in the world is US, and that's not something to be proud about, and it's there in Las Vegas, right? So where people visit, I mean, people don't want to visit to the landfill, but people visit to Las Vegas. The landfill is close by. It's 2,000, almost 2,500, 300 acres, if I'm not mistaken. 2,300 acres of land, which is close to about 1,250 football fields. I mean, such a big landfill which is actually there. You can imagine that much waste which we have actually taken in, we are throwing it and making it as a waste at that this thing, right? So that is the amount of waste we are generating. Yeah.
Noted. So for our last question, could you give some examples on circular economy that countries are doing currently?
Yeah, there are various examples to talk about. I mean, some of the examples, if I can talk about, for example, the textile sphere, right? So textile, if you talk about, there are companies like Patagonia and Ellen Fisher, right? So who are kind of actually very, very actively doing in terms of the circular economy. Especially they are also kind of talking about repair and remanufacture your garments, which is actually there. So they are there. There are platforms which are being used now to sell old garments and things like that. On Levi's and other things are being sold. The older garments are being sold into this thing. Rental is becoming a big craze, which is actually, that is a fantastic thing to do, especially when you see the kind of the function, the garments which are used for major functions and things like that, or a wedding or things. These are being given on hire, right? So because they're very expensive, you're putting a lot of materials into that, and these are on hire. So that's a good way that is about sharing the resource. So that is, and also if you talk about, there is something like a jeans redesign is a concept where the design itself, you're bringing the concept of circular economy, right? So those are some of the examples. And then you talk about the construction, where you have to come modular design, right? So you talk about end of life of a building. If it is a modular design, then you're able to break it down, reconstruct it in a more easier manner. There are various examples in terms of the packaging which is actually there, instead of the regular plastic packaging which is actually there. So these could be actually getting into a landfill. Then instead of that, there are biodegradable kind of packaging, like mushroom is one of the example where this is used. And also there are various examples. One of them is also about sharing, where Philips is actually working on in terms of office lighting, where they talk about putting the office lights, and they own that capital, right? The capital is not owned by the user. The user uses the light. He needs the light. He doesn't need so if the user, what happens is, because he doesn't have the know-how of recycling or how to maintain that, so the companies like Philips, for example, they maintain their own product. Basically, that's their capital. They maintain that, and end of the day, they are able to recycle because they have the technology, and the user only uses the light. So these are various technologies, various ways of working. A lot of examples going forward, but it's slow and steady. I mean, long way to go. But yes, we are getting there.
Right. So thank you, Mr. Nayak, for this wonderful insight to this program about circular economy. So in our next episode, we will dive more deeper and discuss more on this particular topic. This is a vast topic, and more on sustainability, other areas also.
Yeah, sure.
So thank you see you in our next episode. Bye.
Thank you.